Caller, you're on the line. You have 2 minutes. Kathy Rodriguez.
Hi, I would like to thank the Board of Supervisors for conducting this meeting. One of my main things that I think that should happen is quality assurance. I worked in quality assurance in my department for 3 years, and all these programs that spoke this afternoon, they all need to have quality assurance within their units. They need to implementation of evidence-based programming, review and update the policy and procedures manuals. They need to review and improve practices by implementing best practices. Just from being in the quality assurance program and dealing with probate court and conservatorship and the people dealing in probate court, there's a lot of areas that need improvement. What I'd like to see is that families and conservators and conservatees also get surveyed, because we're hearing one side of the program. We're not hearing what the family has to say. Everything that was said today sounds very good, and that's what should be happening and should be taking place, but that's not what's happening, and that's not what's taking place. I just thank God for quality assurance, because that's what's going to change the program. That's what's going to change what happens to our elderly, the families, because the whole dynamics in this whole situation affects so many people. The public guardian, what happens is the court has them write a report to state who should get guardianship. And right there, that's something that's biased in itself, because families are getting blindsided by these reports by the public guardian, when the public guardian shouldn't be writing reports for their best interest and not the family's best interest. It should be an outside party that's not even connected with probate whatsoever that does these reports, because even the court investigator doesn't do a thorough report. And I've investigated and I've done some quality assurance on every single department, and I found a lot of flaws, and that's something that needs to be changed, and new policies and procedures need to be implemented in this program.
Caller, you're on the line. You have 2 minutes. Lisa.
Good afternoon to the Board of Supervisors. Good afternoon, especially Supervisor Miley. This is a very important session, and I am so glad that we are finally discussing probate court. I have been involved in many problematic cases, and I do think that one thing that must happen is we must get the bench, the attorneys representing proposed conservatees as well as the families, and we have to come up with policies and procedures that are consistent and that everyone understands, so that we can each be in our own lane with the same understanding of what the job is. For example, a case that Kathy Rodriguez was involved in, the court, the problem with, for example, strictly zealous advocacy is that many of our conservatees have experienced brainwashing, or what I call false memories, which is consistent with the disease of Alzheimer's disease or consistent with dementia. But when the court hears a court attorney, whether it's LAS or the public defender, speaking about the proposed conservatees' wishes, they are not being also told that these people have a diagnosed medical problem that results in these statements, which may have no bearing on reality at all. So what I'd like to see is that zealous advocacy be caressed with the understanding that the person the zealous advocate is representing may have a cognitive impairment or may have a biological, disease that is diagnosed, that can be diagnosed and recognized, which is causing statements of aggression, fear, and even anger towards family members. And I think we need to study together how to represent these people in light of their diagnoses so that the family is treated fairly. But this is a wonderful beginning towards a conversation. We need to heal our courts. We need to fix our courts because the baby boomers are coming. In a few years, they hit age 80, and we are not prepared. But my heart and my soul says thank you so much, and I hope that we can do this in Los Angeles County as well. I believe it's a process of education, supervision, and accountability, and we can make this work. But we all have to have a better understanding first of what each other's jobs are. Thank you so much, supervisors. Thank you for listening to us.
Caller, you're on the line. You have 2 minutes.
I'm calling because I'm involved with a gentleman who lost his wife, who was befriended by a supposed contractor. The contractor got him to quitclaim his house over to him, saying he would work with him, get his house improved. Another gentleman at a gas station, the son of the gas station owner, also got him to quitclaim his house over to him. And then the first gentleman, who was the supposed contractor, got somebody who was a friend of his in adult protective services or social services to come over to the house with a doctor. She answered all the questions for the gentleman, and they proceeded to put him under the hospices of the county. In the meantime, they have wasted his money. The conservator sent the person over there to do housework for him when he was told by the gentleman that he did not want anybody coming to the house, that he was perfectly able to take care of himself, clean his house, and do the deeds. He got myself and another neighbor involved, and the other neighbor has been taking him to the doctors, taking care of him. I got them to call the French embassy because the gentleman is a Basque French gentleman. And we got the French embassy involved. We got a lawyer through the French embassy to get his house back for him. The city attorney's, the district attorney was never called to get involved in this when those two gentlemen should have been arrested for elder abuse for this. The gentleman was threatened by these people. The conservator that was appointed told this gentleman that the county was going to take his house, that it would no longer be his, threatening him. And I witnessed this, as did another person that was involved in this. So when I'm listening to all these good things being said, there's a lot of stuff going on that's not being talked about that needs to come out. I am talking about taking this to the grand jury and having a thorough investigation done of all of this and making this very public, because this cannot be just a few people that are on board that have had these problems. This gentleman is now in Contra Costa County at a senior home that was gotten through the French embassy, not through the county, because the county wanted to stick him in a home here in Oakland. And this house is in a position to be sold right now, but it's taken months to get that on the market because the county has been dragging their feet because, gee, we got to go to court to make things happen. This gentleman did not want to be under the supervision of any of this or the conservatorship. And the gentleman that's been the conservator needs to be fired from the county for the way he has done or lack of doing his job. The first involvement that I had with him is he left on vacation and left the gentleman that he was in charge of with no money whatsoever.
Today's hearing is not about individual cases, but we will take those issues into account as we reflect on next steps. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vail.
Caller, you're on the line. You have 2 minutes. Michigan resident.
I think we need to, first of all, get really serious. If you're serious about finding out the facts and the truth, that you will get a coalition of people and go in on your own without the courts knowing and do your own investigation. We have problems with some of these judges who sit on the bench, who take the law into their own hands. I call them the criminals, and I call a handful of the attorneys in some of these law firms the co-conspirators. They take the law, they bend it to their ability to steal, rape, and pillage. They totally find families that are fighting or have problems, and they take advantage of them. It's really a sad day in the United States of America when these attorneys, and I say attorneys and judges, and these prosecutors, these law enforcement all stick together and they all steal and rape from the elderly. Really? How sad. There is no integrity. These judges do not uphold the canons or the laws, or their oath of office. I heard that this prosecutor or this public defender has 366 cases. Well, if family comes first, why are these attorneys all involved? We need to put a limit on how many people they can have. 10, I think, is plenty. That'll keep you really busy. And then for the fees, they need to be paid out of the county as they are being hired by the county. Keep them out of the people's estates. That is not their business to come in and sell assets off to their friends and their families. This is a real racketeering business. The courts are not being babysat by anybody, neither is social services, and they're all in cahoots together, and it's a shame. And it's a vast amount of people that are being ripped off and put in guardianship under false pretenses so these people can line their pockets.
Do you wish to speak on this item or public comment?
This is really a beautiful thing that's happening today. I want to acknowledge you, Supervisor Nate Miley and Supervisor Richard Vallier. You have made me very happy today, and I think many others too. We all have different lenses and different perspectives on this, but today is historical because it's the beginning of another door open to continue the discussion to make things right. The three words I think about are integrity, accountability, and oversight. And if we can look at those three words and just begin to elaborate and discuss them, whether we're in small meetings, whether we're meeting with the presiding judge, which I hope we get a chance to do. We just don't want to be a complaint. We have a large advocacy group nationwide, and we're looking at this. And if we could get together and begin discussions, treat each other with respect, it's a humanitarian issue here, a human factor. And if we begin to care about each other, love each other as God wills us to do, and begin to care about our elderly, we don't want them dying. That's all. It's just simple. We just don't want to see them. We want their golden years to be the best that they can be. We know there are circumstances and situations that arise. Families are challenging at times, and so are public servants. But if we can bring some sort of cohesiveness together to communicate effectively and powerfully, we can make a difference here in Alameda County and be the catalyst for the rest of the world.
Vice President Miley, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Is it possible that we have the staff bring back recommendations that we could forward to the full board? Because I think there's some things we should be taking up. I know I already asked about the legislation, that we support the legislation as one item, and maybe we can do the recommendations out of today's meeting. But the legislation, I also think, both you, Chair Valle, and I, and the other supervisors, we all have an opportunity to talk to the grand jury every year. I know I've talked to the grand jury about this issue, probate and conservatorship reform. I'll bring it up again with them. It's up to them, the civil grand jury, to decide what they look at in terms of their inquiry. I also think that it's important that we flag the need for continuing education for attorneys who are involved in this area. It just seems to me like 3 units of education, continuing education, is not adequate. And you could just see from the presentation today, and this is the first time I've seen this presentation. We had a presentation on probate and conservatorship maybe 8 years ago. I can't remember, but it was a very lengthy presentation and detailed presentation as well. And I appreciate today's presentation and you, Chair Valle, for having this joint meeting of both social services and public protection on this matter. today, because once again, it helped to refresh my memory, but it also provided new information for me as well. So I do think continuing education is another thing we might want to try to recommend to the board, that we try to get legislation, or if legislation is not required, try to get a recommendation to the Judicial Council that attorneys be required to have more continuing education in this area. I do think a study or analysis of the data is important. I really do think we need to do a further drilling down into that. I know the public guardian and social services is prepared to provide us with information, but it just seems like there's a lot of additional data that we could be reviewing just to determine whether or not there's any other areas of deficiency that might need to be investigated for further reform. We heard Lisa talk about the need for consistency and an understanding of everyone's role and their jobs in this whole process of conservatorship and probate. So I think, the fact that there might be recommendations we want to pursue might be a good idea to either take up at this committee or agendize it for a future meeting so that we can have the public see these recommendations and then maybe forward them to the full board. The other thing I just want to mention is Venus held a big hearing on this around conservatorship and probate reform last year. And there were over 100 people involved with that hearing from all over the state. I think some people from out of state. So this is indeed an issue of relevance, both here in Alameda County and throughout the state. And I'm not saying the county and the state doesn't do a good job here, but the point is, I do think there are areas of further reform that we can push to ease the concern around probate and conservatorship. I don't know if we'll ever satisfy everyone's concern about this, but I do think we can push that agenda a little further. I think now that we have a new Attorney General, maybe Rob Bonta might take this up since he came from the Assembly. He also worked in the San Francisco DA's office before he was an Assembly person. Now he's the State Attorney General. Maybe approaching Rob might be a good thing as well. I know we did approach former Attorney General, but we didn't get anywhere with him.
I agree with you. We can do, first of all, a synopsis of today's hearing under board comments tomorrow. I'll ask my staff to prepare a brief summary of the findings that we saw. I know that Faith Battles is here and Lori Cox as well. We can ask them to follow up with our offices on recommendations. One, on the comments that were made today in presentations. Two, legislation, and then going forward, how we can follow up to be even more effective. I'm really pleased with the presentations. They were very thorough. I hear from the comments made by the public about these issues that Alameda County has done a good job. And the fact that we have the presiding judge, the district attorney, the public defender on these calls gives you a sense of the thoughtfulness and mindfulness of the people who work in this county. They're engaged, they're involved, they know what our agenda was today. So clearly people care about this issue. And the fact that we have callers from other states in the union, perhaps, there's work to be done in those states in a more comprehensive way, but clearly Alameda County is a leader in this area. As you and I have hosted the Guardian movie, I remember doing that about 3 years ago in my district. We have substantial conversations as a result of those screenings that we did, and we had a full house. So we're quite seasoned in this area, and I think that I want to thank all of the speakers that presented today. Clearly, and whether the grand jury agrees or not, I believe that we're on the cutting edge of making reform and changes. But in Alameda County, my gut tells me that we're doing a very thorough and thoughtful job for the people that we are working on behalf of.
Because when you mentioned the Guardian, I forgot to state, we did host the Guardian, my office. We hosted in the board chambers back on January 11th, 2019. to bring, I think we had a couple hundred people in the chambers that day to view the Guardian. Sometimes myself, Supervisor Valle, as elected officials, we can serve as an intermediary in some of those situations to bring, not to bring up particular cases, but to try to talk to the judges and others to try to see what kind of reforms can be pushed. I know DA O'Malley has brought that up to the Judicial Council, and that might be something else the board can do. We can send a letter to the Judicial Council as well, encouraging them to take some steps in this direction.
I first want to thank you for this opportunity, and I mirror what Vina said, that this is a great positive that this subject is even being talked about. I think it's a huge step forward. I would hope that we would see this across the United States, because it is an epidemic across the United States now. It's very early on in this meeting. I had to get up a couple times because it was very difficult to hear from the LAS and what they were saying, how they conduct their actions in the probate court. There's many people in this country, and I know many personal people, that this was not how the probate court conducted themselves. So it's very frustrating and hard to hear. We are all going into this system, all of us here sitting here, and it can happen to anybody. There's a judge in Orange County, which is a jurisdiction I'm in, who was a family court judge, and they are doing what they've done to many of us to their own, to that court judge. They did a reverse mortgage and whatnot. You know, a lot of times people say to me, how could this be happening in the United States with my own, with my mom passing in the last 13 years of my mom? We were extremely isolated, and I couldn't call my mom and say happy birthday, call her and say I love you, 3 days notice to see her. What kind of country are we living in? I mean, that's just clearly wrong on every level. The United States stands for family, and that's not what many of us have experienced. I think in one sentence, if I was going to put a focus that we could look towards as the problem, is that guardianship and conservatorship in our country, the guardians and conservators are accountable to nobody. And that's the problem. When you give free rein and there's no accountability and there's money involved, you got serious problems. And that's what we have. There was a letter from a retired judge who resides in Florida now, and he sent out, from what I understand in the letter, he sent out to all the judges in California, actually admitting that there is a big problem and that the system needs to do better, that we do hold our officers in the court accountable for taking the oath, that they're there to help and respect and uphold each other as citizens, and particularly the elderly that are very vulnerable. I loved, Mr. Valle, when you said the cutting edge is, we're on the cutting edge of reform, because that is just my dire hope and prayer that we can get to that. I still have faith, and I'm in the coalition with many people, including Venus and Kathy, and our own personal experiences. It's very hard to not be emotional when it's your mother that you're isolated from, or a parent or a loved one. It's very difficult. And I think I would challenge anybody that's listening to this in the courtroom today, that these are our family, these are human beings, these are people we love. And to sit by and watch the abuse and the isolation is extremely difficult. So I do want to say that please give us a little bit of leeway when there's emotions involved, because these are our loved ones and our family. Again, thank you for this opportunity. And I look forward to Mr. Valle saying, I would love for Alameda to be the change. That would be great. You go down in history for being part of that major reform in this country.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. We've invested a lot of time on this. As Vice President Miley stated, since 2019, we've been hearing about these issues, publicly vetting the issues, sharing our findings with the community. We sincerely appreciate your participation. You're the key for us to make reforms and changes. Let's hope that Alameda County will be the trendsetter like we have been on other issues. We're adjourned. Thank you.